Hi, my name is Zara and I'm the CEO at Gapsquare. We have developed Gapsquare and launched it about a year ago so that we could bring together science, technology and data to address the gender pay gap. It was around that time that the World Economic Forum has come up and said it will be 117 years before the gender pay gap was to be eradicated, and I was quite upset that that's not going to happen in my lifetime, and it's not going to happen in the lifetime of my daughters. And I thought, what is there that we could do to help address the gender pay gap much quicker? And as we've seen over the past several years, artificial intelligence and data science have been used to disrupt different areas within our lives. So we've seen Uber disrupt the way we use taxis. We've seen artificial intelligence being used to disrupt the way we do politics. So we thought this is exactly what we could do and use it for a good cause in terms of addressing the gender pay gap. It was also really well fitted with the fact that I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know if you've heard about him, but in 2000 he released a book called The Tipping Point, and it's on how little things can make a big impact and a big difference. So ever since I've read that book, I kept on thinking, what is there going to be in terms of gender equality? When are we going to see that tipping point? When is that going to happen? Because in his book, Gladwell looks at the way things, ideas and visions, what is it that makes them tip and spread like fire and quickly catch on, and all of a sudden we have a trend. So I was thinking, when is that going to happen? And then there was the Think Act Report framework in 2012, and I thought, this is going to happen. I can feel it. It's going to be the tipping point. And then it didn't. So the regulations were coming up for gender pay gap reporting, and I thought, this is a chance for a tipping point, except this time I didn't want to leave it just to that. I wanted to make sure that we're using data, we're using science, and we're using technology backed up with great people that are already starting to make movement in the area so that we can really make progress. So over the past year, we've helped just over 70 companies use our cloud-based software to look into their gender pay gap. And what I'm going to focus on in the next few minutes is the data that they choose to look at and why they choose to look at that data, issues with the data that they have encountered, and what are the key trends that are emerging from analyzing the data in terms of the gender pay gap. So over the past year, we've had just over 70 companies with 250 employees or more look at their gender pay gap by using our cloud-based software. It's really easy to use because you just upload the data into the system, and it generates instant reports that highlight the key metrics that are needed for reporting. So you get all of the mean, the median, you get a beautiful graph with quartile distribution of employees, you get the bonus pay gap, percentage of men and women that receive the bonus, as well as the quartile distribution of bonus pay, which we find most fascinating because it's significantly higher proportion of men towards the higher earning of bonus and more women clustered towards lower payment of bonus. So it helps understand the bigger picture. A lot of companies choose to upload data obviously around their pay and gender. Then a lot of companies also choose to upload data around their age so that they can see how the gender pay gap is reflected amongst different age groups. Length of service is another one that companies are choosing to look at, and then they can see how the gender pay gap affects women that have worked for a particular company for a year, 2, 3, 20. And then also an interesting element to look at is grade and job level, and this is where a lot of the grey territory emerges in terms of gender pay gap and equal pay. An important area is gender pay gap by department. All of the companies that we have supported have uploaded data in terms of departments so that they can understand what particular departments have higher gender pay gaps. And this is where issues around occupational segregation are coming through, where you have more women clustered in departments like HR or departments like that, and more men clustered in departments that have higher pay per hour, like engineering or digital tech or other areas. They can also choose to upload teams so that they can see how the gender pay gap works by teams. A lot of the groups that we have supported have chosen to look at the gender pay gap overall as a group, but also identify the gender pay gap by particular agency and what agencies have more issues than others and how they can address that, both as a group but also as separate legal entities. And another interesting one is gender pay gap by location. So we have, for instance, one of our clients, Osborne Clark. They are located in Bristol, Reading and London, and obviously the gender pay gap is one figure, but when you look at it by location, it's much smaller because in London the wages are higher than, say, in Bristol or in Reading. So it's important that the reports that the tool generates are only as good as the data that the companies choose to upload into it, and the more data they choose to upload, the more insights they can get into where the key issues are. We use those. A lot of the companies also choose to upload historical data from a year ago or 2 years ago, and that helps identify trends and really see where the gender pay gap is headed. Because you might do a dry run now and think, oh great, right now with the data from, we've had a lot of dry runs from April last year. So April last year was telling us gender pay gap of 12, we're good to go. But then if you upload April 2015, it was 11 before that. So there's a trend of the gender pay gap going up within your company, and that might be reflected in April this year. We have also introduced ethnicity as an indicator. So if companies have data on ethnicity, they can choose that in the system, they can upload it in the system, and they will get to see an indication of what gender pay gap by ethnicity is. Now, in terms of the key issues with the data that a lot of our customers have had, they vary, but the primary issue is that data is not in one place. So the biggest challenge is really being able to get hold of the data that's not just the gender and the pay, but it's also the gender and the pay and the grade and the department and the age, because that really helps contextualize the issue and helps understand the key challenges within this. Another element is that data is incomplete. So for instance, when it comes to analyzing gender pay gap by ethnicity, disclosing your ethnicity is not mandatory. So companies have, only some of the employees have disclosed ethnicity. So the gender pay gap by ethnicity can be still not a complete picture. Many companies have an issue in that over the past years they've grown through acquisition, and that leads to the fact that their data is dispersed around different systems that they haven't yet merged into one, and also the fact that the HR system has not amalgamated all of the job levels, job grades across the entire company after merging, and that is showing a significant gender pay gap because it's discrepancies in data. Another issue with a lot of companies we've seen do a dry run so far is that they have used yearly wages to look into the gender pay gap. So they have taken HR data and they've uploaded into the system, and they're looking at, this is how much per year this person is earning. Our system does allow that, so you can upload yearly wages, and it will calculate down the hourly wage excluding overtime as per government regulations. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily give you the same picture as you will have in April, because in April you would have to exclude employees that are on maternity pay or sick pay, and you will have to specifically look at only the relevant employees in that period. So it might have an impact on the gender pay gap. One of the biggest issues with data is also in relation to people who have received pay for piecework over the snapshot period, because often the case in different companies is that those financial details go through the finance department and not through payroll or HR. So it's really difficult for companies to, especially bigger companies, to make changes quickly and adapt and make sure that all of this data will be in the same place in April. And we've heard from many companies that are saying they will choose to skip it this year and not really look at piecework or consultancy work that others have done for them, and only look straight forward at the payroll system. I think as long as companies understand that next year, when they do an inclusive figure, that will have an impact on their gender pay gap figure and might show it as bigger next year than this year, because this year they've excluded, say, 1 or 2% of the people who do work for them. And usually consultancy work is quite highly paid per hour. In a lot of industries, more likely to be done by men. So in terms of the impact of that data on the gender pay gap, it will be quite big. In terms of the trends that we are seeing, is actually the gender pay gap is going down. So from all the companies that have uploaded historical data, we've seen trends where the gender pay gap has decreased by 1 or 2% from 2015 to 2016. So that's positive to see. I'm not sure if it's just because these are the companies that are very keen to do gender pay gap analysis, the early adopters, they already are doing things to narrow the gender pay gap, but this is the trend we've seen. Gender pay gap by ethnicity is a significant issue for most companies that have uploaded ethnicity in their data sets, and it's quite often 2 or 3 times higher than the average company gender pay gap, which is a big issue. Other trends that are quite common across all of the people who've done gender pay gap analysis and used their data is that there is indeed a big clustering of women in the lower quartile, and a significant discrepancy between number of men and women in the upper quartile. In terms of bonuses, if you arrange bonuses by pay quartiles, which we do because it's easy to do if you have bonus data, there is a significant difference in number of men and women who receive bonuses according to the upper quartile. So the higher the bonus pay, the more likely, the more men there are in that quartile, quite often 2 or 3 times more men than women. And women are more predominantly clustered in the first and lower, in the lower quartile and lower middle quartile in terms of bonuses, but also in terms of pay. And also the gender pay gap is still increasing both with age and with lengths of service. So the more a woman has been with the same company, the more likely it is that the gender pay gap is getting higher, in addition to the age. So these are the key trends that we are seeing within data, and it's really interesting to do a lot of comparison with also the Office for National Statistics tool that was released about half a year ago, was it about 6 months ago, where you can go on the ONS website and you can type in a job description and it gives you the sort of average gender pay gap by occupation. And we're actually finding that with a lot of the companies that use our tool, it's quite different than the ONS data. So I'll be quite curious to see at the end of the first reporting period, how does that impact the ONS data and our general assumptions about the gender pay gap that we currently have. In the end, I'd like to encourage you to go onto Gapsquare.com. This is where our tool is. We have a free version. You can upload your company's data and get instant insights into the gender pay gap. The free tool does offer mean and median pay gap, as well as the distribution of the workforce across the 4 pay quartiles. And then if you want to do a more detailed analysis, we do provide more advanced packages. And the idea is that we want to help companies be self-sufficient in terms of analyzing their gender pay gap. They can do it in an instant, and they can do it at any time in the year to see where they're headed and how they're making progress. Any questions, I'm happy to answer. Thank you very much.